All right, welcome back, boys and girls. So we got the variable valve timing, the VTEC solenoid, cleaned up, removed. I replaced the gasket inside. It looked like, well, I don't have it anymore, but it looked like shit. So we replaced that, cleaned this all up. I just sort of did some evapo rust and cleaned this heat shield up a little bit, and we got our oil pressure sensors and our fittings all fitted up, and I had to trim a little bit of clearance. If you can see, it just barely made it. So that looks to be all sorted. Got the exhaust ports all cleared up. I mean, I'm not cleaning, not well, I don't have a light to show you in there, but it's all sooty and whatever. So I'm not, this time around, I'm not going to do any head work. I'm not going to do any internal motor work. I'm not going to get in there and clean that shit up. We're just going to run it as is. As to why, I don't know why. I don't actually know how good this motor runs, but I don't think that'll make that much of a difference. I think if I was, provided I don't damage anything, there's maybe a future iteration down the road where I actually take the head off, clean it, replace the valves. Maybe I replace the valves with like titanium valves or something. Anyway, I'm not doing anything fancy this time. We're just gonna run it stock and see what it can do. So I did take off. Let's look over at the sort of donor motor. Got the whole turbo assembly exhaust manifold taken off. It's a ugly oily mess under there. And as I mentioned before, that sucker was not flat. So we had a couple of options there. We could just scrap the whole thing, sell the fucking car, quit working on cars, and just do something else with my life. Option 2 would be to just go with another manifold. Option 3 would be weld on another flange and machine it down. Option 4 would be just take this flange and machine it down. Or I went with option 5, which was just file it. Just use a manual file and try to make it better. I've improved it, but this is not ideal. Ideally, you would clamp this up in a mill, and you would indicate on various spots. So like, this thing is not flat, but it's not just wavy this way. It's like fucking twisted. It's got all kind of distortion going on. So you would have to just either, well, what you might do is you might not mill it. You might just put it on a big ass belt sander and flatten. And actually, that's what you could do. I considered doing that. I have a belt sander that this would fit on, but I don't have all that much confidence that it's gonna really do what I want. Maybe that's what I should have done. Anyway, that's not what I did do. I don't know, but I think if you had a good proper belt sander, and I don't, I have a shitty one from Harbor Freight. I just didn't have a whole lot of faith that I wasn't going to cause more issues than resolve. In any case, so I used this level. Well, I used a couple of levels, but I just grabbing this level. I don't have a real good machinist straight edge, but this is pretty close, and actually this is kind of cool. This is an old Stanley level, but if you can look closely, there's tool marks on the edges of this guy. So this is like, I bought this at an auction from I believe this was the same estate auction from a machinist who had passed on. But it's right, this level is just a carpentry level, but it's fucking milled, and so that's not to say that it's any sort of, precision measuring instrument. But it's probably better than what you get at Home Depot these days. They just don't make them like they used to, and there's a lot of ways where like that's not such a good thing. Like we've moved on in manufacturing and some of the tools and instruments that we use. But as far as like precision measurement instruments and stuff like that, we really haven't moved on. You could get this nice machined edge on there. So this guy is fairly straight, and there's some gaps in there, and I think when I started filing, we were in the neighborhood of somewhere between 20 and 30 thousandths. So I couldn't fit a 20 thousandths, or excuse me, I couldn't fit a 30 thousandths gauge, but I could fit a 20 thousandths feeler gauge. And so this is not precision metrology here, boys and girls. We're just trying to make it better and make it enough so where that it's gonna seal. So if you can kind of see, I picked out some high spots, a little bit of high spots over here that I'm just kind of filing away, and I'm just using a bastard file. This is a couple different sizes. A fairly rough. Well, not a fine file, right? I mean, that's why they call it a bastard file. It's a bastard between fine and coarse. Fun fact, boys and girls, that's what a bastard file is. It's not derogatory. It's meant to be not fitting in with one group or not fitting in with one classification or the other. It's not a fine, it's not a coarse, it's a bastardization of the two, I guess is where the term comes from. Either that or I just made all that shit up, but you could probably look it up pretty easily. So finding the high spots and filing them down. So my concerns, not so much, right? The issue here, and I have the old, I do have the old gasket. So you can kind of see, I couldn't audibly hear anything, but I could see evidence, and it's not as pristine as it was before because I was kind of running my fingers on it and fouling it all up with my fingers. But you could kind of see these soot marks on this sort of graphite, I don't know if you call it a graphite impregnated gasket, but this gasket of which graphite is a major component. There's different kind of gaskets out there. These ones, if you ask, a lot of people will tell you that they fucking suck. And they do suck if you're talking about, like, they do suck in the respect that they give. Once they get hot, once they get warm, they become more ductile and they give. And that's not good if you're like a automotive manufacturer and you need to assemble an exhaust manifold on an engine and you need to ship it. Warming up the engine to where it's nice and hot and then clamping the bolts down tighter, not really an ideal process. So you don't see these kind of gaskets very frequently in automotive production. But what the benefit that they offer is that they deform, or they compress a lot relative to other kinds of gaskets. There's the kinds of, I don't know if you call it a spring gasket, the kind of gasket that has basically a ridge around the portion where it's trying to seal. So that's going to work straight away. The problem is, if you're a ham-fisted fucking hack like me, you're oftentimes trying to fit together two somewhat imperfect surfaces. And that is very much the case with this component, quite imperfect indeed. But so once this gasket gets nice and warm, it softens up and you can compress it more, and it can fill in those bigger imperfections. So the hope is, so I don't actually know what occurred here, whether this is evidence of, I mean, it's clearly evidence of leakage, but what may have happened was, I assembled it, ran it, got it nice and warm. It proceeded to then leak through the gasket. I then tightened it up and it stopped leaking. That could be the case. We don't know. I know that it didn't sound like an exhaust manifold leak, and I know what that sounds like. Okay, so we got this down to, I don't know, something like 15 thousandths in some of these gaps. Again, we don't know what kind of fucking way this thing is distorted. It's wavy, it's twisted, it's all kind of shit. But overall, it's not. I mean, it's pretty. It's not as bad as it was. It's still highly imperfect. But I focus on where the just fucking keep banging on about this. I might as well. Where the these areas, right? So evidenced by our gasket, we're leaking here and here. How much, I don't know. But it's easy to see why, is you don't have clamping support here. You got clamping fasteners across this port, but these ports only have one clamp on them. Why the fuck did they design it like that? I do not fucking know. I think it works well on a flat flange, but if you're a fuck like me and you made your own flange and it's not flat, that can be a bit tricky. In any case, that's the design that we got. So the idea was we had a high spot over here, so I cut that down a bit. A high spot over here, which probably doesn't make all that much of a difference because you're clamping down over here. So the issue is, if you have a high spot somewhere between the area that we're concerned about, right? So I'm not really concerned about these at all, unless there's a really extremely relatively high spot on one of these sides, which in this case I think there was slightly over here. In any case, there was a fairly pronounced high spot here. So you can imagine if you're clamping here and you have a high spot here and a low spot here, how's this low spot going to get pushed against, how's it going to get clamped against the cylinder head? And you got this clamp here, but that becomes an issue, and it's the same story over here. So have we resolved the issue? Well, I don't know that I actually had an issue to begin with. Have we improved it? I'm pretty confident of that. Is it good enough? Fuck, I don't know. Yeah, so I think that about wraps it up. Just a quick update. So next steps moving forward, we'll get this assembly bolted up to the back of the K20A2, get our supply and our drains mounted up. So we have our drain here, and if this looks like a shitty boogery weld, don't be fooled. It is. But the issue with a cast aluminum piece, and even though that was well, it's probably a Japanese casting. You know what? I'm not even going to blame the casting this time. I probably didn't clean. I didn't really clean this as much as I should have. But I'm pretty confident it's not going to leak. It doesn't look super beautiful. It's not the worst weld I've ever seen, though. To be fair, it's not the worst weld. The worst weld is also one of mine on the fuel rail you would have seen earlier. So we get all that buttoned up. Then the plan is, and I'll actually probably switch wiring harnesses from this engine, from the other engine to this one, just because things like fuel injector and stuff like that. Fuel injector leads. Then we'll get this engine off the stand, take the clutch assembly off the other engine, mate this engine to that transmission, which now has the limited slip. I probably should have documented the installation of that limited slip differential. I got it from, it's like an H factory. Some people say that H factory is great. Some people say they suck. I don't say anything because I don't really know. So that's a wrap for right now, and I'll catch you next time.